welcome. I'm Ijoma Onyato. Tonight, President Muhammadu Buhari says the government is in talks with the Niger Delta militants to find a lasting solution to the security situation in the region. Nigeria's economy is technically in recession, so says Minister of Finance Kemi Adeosun and her budget and planning counterpart Udoma. Foreign Affairs Minister Jeffrey Onyama says there's no evidence against 3 lawmakers accused of sexual misconduct by the US ambassador. And French prosecutor says Nice truck attacker received logistical support from who are now in police custody. On business news tonight, United Nations Conference on Trade and Development wants Africa to find new ways of generating revenue.
And in sports news, Court of Arbitration for Sports upholds Russia's track and field athletes ban from this year's Olympics.
I'm Yemisi Ikpaye, and from Abuja, Senate President Bukola Saraki reshuffles chairman of Senate committees in a move seen as addressing some of the conflicts in the upper chamber.
The federal government is exploring other options to end the violence in the Niger Delta region. The president says he's bringing the oil companies on board to work with law enforcement agencies to achieve its aim. At a farewell audience with Mr. Michael Zinner, the outgoing ambassador of Germany to Nigeria at the State House, President Muhammadu Buhari says that the government is studying the amnesty program from the previous administration in order to secure the environment and attract investment. He also thanked the government of Germany for its support to Nigeria in tackling insecurity and the ongoing resettlement of displaced people in the northeastern parts of the country. The outgoing German ambassador also promised Germany's assistance to Nigeria in the rehabilitation process for the northeast. Now, activities of vandals in the Niger Delta region are responsible for the low level of crude oil production in the country. The Group Managing Director of the Nigerian National Petroleum Corporation, Dr. Pt.1, made this known while meeting with the Chief of Defence Staff in Abuja. He asked for the assistance of the military to end attacks on oil installations.
Nigeria before now, according to the Nigerian National Petroleum Corporation, produced 2.2 million barrels of crude oil per day. This has, however, dropped to 1.5 million barrels per day due to the activities of vandals. To arrest the situation, the Group Managing Director of NNPC appeals to security agencies to protect the nation's critical assets.
These critical national assets have become subject of incessant vandalism, theft, and sabotage. The CDS is invited to please note that the 2016 National Budget Plan was based on 2.2 million barrels per day of crude oil production. However, the budget plan is now grossly impacted.
The Chief of Defence Staff assures the NNPC officials of adequate protection of the nation's oil and gas facilities. He also advised the corporation on the need to provide specialized platforms that will further assist security agencies in performing their duties.
On the military side, we ensure that the necessary protection of the infrastructure is known, the necessary intelligence are obtained, and also ensure that we'll stop any act of sabotage.
Statistics reeled out by the Nigerian National Petroleum Corporation reveals that the nation lost 643 million litres of petrol in 2015. With over 1,400 incidents recorded between January and now, the corporation expresses fears that the nation's budget plan may suffer if the situation is not arrested.
The federal government now saves 6 billion naira monthly through a 3.63% cut on recurrent expenditure, and that's according to the Minister of Finance, Mrs. Kemi Adeosun, at a briefing on the state of the economy with senators. She says that the move is part of the federal government's plan to ensure fiscal discipline in the face of dwindling oil revenues.
Recent issues bordering on the nation's economy and how it affects Nigerians is one of the reasons why the Minister of Finance is here to brief members of the upper legislative house. In the company of key officials of the ministry and parastatals of the Ministry of Finance, she makes her way to address issues of concern to many Nigerians. She told lawmakers what the government is doing to ensure fiscal discipline in the face of the recession, key amongst which is the reduction in recurrent expenditure. She urged Nigerians not to panic over recent comments by international organizations on the economy.
The economy is actually in very, very good hands, and we're doing absolutely our best to get through this difficult period. And I explained how we're doing that. We're being extremely disciplined around our spending. We're investing in the essential infrastructure. I gave the metric. We have released 74 billion naira to works in 2 months, compared to 19 billion for the whole of last year. We are doing everything possible to avert and to manage the situation, which we didn't create, unfortunately.
There were questions from lawmakers. Most of them dwelt on how the federal government plans to mitigate the impacts of the fall of oil prices on the masses.
2016 budget, we have 2.2 trillion budget deficit. And I was expecting you in your presentation to tell us how far you've gone with the borrowings.
The minister told the lawmakers that 14 billion naira has been released for the social intervention program, while a total of 247 billion naira capital releases have been made. She's confident that this will stimulate economic activity.
Nigeria is actually still weathering the storm quite well. I know it's painful, I know it's difficult, but I think we have gone through the worst. The lowest oil prices are the FAC receipts that we are just processing now. Our revenues are looking a lot stronger, especially non-oil. FIRS is performing relatively well, even given the difficulties of the economy. Customs revenues have remained stable.
No doubt the nation's economy is going through some challenging times, and its impact has been very tough on Nigerians. Many are eager to see how some of the policies taken to alleviate the sufferings of the masses are realized quickly.
And still on the economy, the Minister of Budget and Planning, Udoma, appears to share similar sentiments with his finance counterpart. He told journalists today that after 2 quarters of negative growth, the Nigerian economy is indeed in recession. The minister was speaking at the end of the National Economic Council meeting, presided over by the Vice President, Professor Yemi Osinbajo. Our State House correspondent, Chukwuma Onekusi, reports.
The state of the economy and what the Nigerian government is doing takes center stage when the National Economic Council members meet. They sat for about 4 hours with Vice President Yemi Osinbajo presiding. Minister of Budget and National Planning clears the air on whether or not Nigeria is in a recession.
We had a first quarter of negative growth. We're still waiting to get all the figures for the second quarter. If, as we suspect, the second quarter is also negative, then of course technically you could say that we are in recession if those figures turn out to be so.
According to the minister, things will begin to improve in the third quarter as government begins to focus on agriculture, solid minerals and manufacturing, and on decisions so far taken on agriculture.
Federal government is pursuing self-sufficiency in food production with all seriousness, as the Minister of Agriculture mentioned. Federal government is also to launch a program called the Green Alternative as a roadmap following the Federal Executive Council's endorsement.
The Central Bank of Nigeria briefed Council on domiciliary account owners and what they should be doing.
All banks' customers that operate domiciliary accounts are permitted to lodge dollar cash into their non-export dump accounts, subject to the provisions of the money laundering account.
An update on the excess crude account shows a balance of $3.93 billion as reported by the Minister of Finance. Chukuma Onwekusi, Channels Television News.
Now, if the economy is to recover as fast as the government expects, many have said the solution to that lies in diversifying the economy. Just yesterday, the government announced a roadmap called the Green Alternative, which is geared towards making agriculture the biggest alternative to oil and gas. To discuss this new plan and how it will impact on the nation's food sufficiency and the economy in general, I'm now being joined in the News at 10 by an agriculture consultant, Mr. Richard Mark Mbaram. Thank you so much for joining us on the News at 10.
Chijama, thank you. Thank you for having me.
We've had different sorts of agriculture plans, in the past.
That's true.
What's going to be different this time?
Yeah, it's difficult to say because details of the new plan have not been made public. But if you are to go by hindsight, you'll just find that the Green Revolution, the Operation Feed the Nation, and indeed the ATA, the Agricultural Transformation Agenda of the immediate past government, have always been more of nomenclature, than basically a radical change in policy. We don't expect this to be a radical departure from what we've had in the past 4 years. We expect more of a rechristening. All right. So what we find presently in the agricultural sector is the need for funding. Of course, 10% of the budget is supposed to go to the agricultural sector. That hasn't happened. We've signed up to that since 2003 under the Maputo Declaration. We've not done that. We should see more radical funding. No matter what the plans we have on ground, if we do not fund the plans in question, we would certainly run into issues.
Does that come under implementation of the plan? Because obviously they're saying this particular plan is going to take about 4 years to implement. So the funding you're talking about, is that also part of it?
Yeah, it's a 3-year plan, they say. Funding under the budget, basically. Fiscal funding. But beyond that, we want to see a more radical, approach to increase in productivity. So you want to ramp up productivity from the farm gate. It has to be. So inputs have to be able to reach the farmers. The farmers we have in Nigeria are more of smallholders. So if you're ramping up production, certainly you've got to find a way of incentivizing the farmers at the farm gate level. If you do that, you would also need to ensure that infrastructure is not a problem. The immediate past government tried the SCPZ, the Staple Crop Processing Zone, just a smart way of delivering infrastructure at specific locales where specific commodities are more readily available. But if we do not do that, the scale of infrastructure that we require across the country is mammoth. So you've got to have a way of doing that smartly. Beyond that, we've got to look at the research institutes. We really, really haven't been fair to ourselves. We need to fund research. Beyond research, we've got to be able to transfer research, the output of research, to the farmers at the farm gate. So we're looking at extension. We have got to do something about this. I don't see how this can happen with the present economic crunch and the dip in the resources of the government. We still have to wait with bated breath to see how things pan out. But the minister has promised in 3 years we're going to be out of the woods. Let's hope they meet promises, words with action.
Indeed, Mr. Richard Mark Mbaram, thank you so much for joining us on the News at 10 tonight. And in part 2, after the break, Benue State House of Assembly suspends its member Kester Kenge for asking the House leadership to resign. That's in a moment. Please stay with us.